This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hey, I'm Ray Hudson, and you are, I don't know who you are, but you're listening to Blaugranagram. Don't be like them kids in the Blair Witch Project and go away, right?
Welcome to the Driven Shot Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of the Driven Shot Podcast. I hope you've all had a wonderful day so far. And these podcasts, well, as I said on Twitter, they will be coming out every single Thursday unless something happens. And in that case, I'll tell you guys in due time. So, today's podcast, it's not going to have too many questions because you guys have not been sending in that many. If you do want to send in any questions to this podcast, do so by using the TDSPod hashtag. It'll be up here. And that way you guys can get more involved in these as well. And I hope that you want to take that initiative as well because it makes these more fun. Because when you ask a question, you'd like to see it answered. And given this format, I think this is a pretty good way of doing it. But I'm slowly running out of questions to answer because I'm not getting too many. So feel free to drop some. If you're watching this or if you're watching throughout the podcast or listening to it and you're thinking of some questions or you have something pops up in your head where you're like, hey, I want to see what his take is on this. Feel free to send those questions. Now, on that note, let's get right into it, I guess. One thing that has been talks about now, given that our results in the league have varied, they've gone up and then they've gone down, and we've had some bad games and we've had some good games in La Liga and in the Champions League. And there have been talks about us, redeeming ourselves in the league and possibly even winning it. I've seen people talking about it on the timeline. And I do think it's possible, especially given that Real Madrid's form has also been swinging. We thrashed Sevilla the other day. Valencia haven't been great, especially after Marcelino left the club. That's caused a little bit of, well, not really an uproar, but it's definitely caused some trouble in the dressing room for Valencia. Atletico haven't been too convincing either, so I think the chance is there for Barca. I definitely think we can get back in form and get the league title by the end of the season. And one of those reasons as well is that while we did have a lot of injuries this season, I think, well, And also, I think one of the reasons for that is while we did have a lot of injuries throughout the season so far, a lot of the injured players are coming back and recovering from their injuries, and I think those players will be absolutely key. Now, you could argue that, well, the players that were injured were big names, and not just big names, but also some of them young stars like Ansu Fati. But when you have a Lionel Messi out injured and an Ousmane Dembele, a Suarez that is still recovering from, getting his form back, it gets tough. And I think now that we have Messi back now that Valverde has Messi back at his disposal, Dembele got back from his injury, but then got the suspension that, by the way, Barca will appeal. There were rumors saying that they would appeal it, and earlier today, which is Tuesday as I'm recording this, spokesman Jose Vives actually went out and confirmed that we will be appealing both his and Ronaldo Araujo's red cards because we feel that they were unfair, and so that's definitely something that will happen. And hopefully, given that we have the Eibar game and then the Clásico being the next league game, hopefully the appeal will mean that it's at least cut down to just the Eibar game, because we have seen some decisions go in favor of other clubs throughout seasons in the past where decisions have gone against us, even though those decisions should not have been they shouldn't have the outcome that they had. And so hopefully this time the ref will see that Dembele calling him very, very bad as a referee, and just saying that, not even saying it in fluent Spanish either, as Messi confirmed earlier that not just Messi, but also you could see in some of the footage that Dembele does not speak Spanish properly. He understands the language and he's good enough to articulate himself in a way that they can understand him, but he's not fluently saying it. And so even Valverde at the presser said that he'd be surprised if Dembele, did say something to Mateo Lahoz, because Dembele is not a fluent speaker of the language. It's hard for him to actually speak the language. So hopefully he will be back for the Clásico, and I think the Clásico will be very, very important. The Clásico usually is very important, but I think the reason it will be important this time is because whatever mentality the teams will have after this game will determine how well they'll do, because both teams are in kind of this hot-cold state where they'll have one really good game and they'll have one atrociously bad game, to put it mildly. So I think the Clásico will be very, very decisive, at least for the next month or two. I think it'll be very decisive for that period of time, especially considering the teams have Champions League. We'll probably get some Copa action throughout the season as well. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be very interesting. And I think Messi, Dembele, Suarez, assuming that Suarez will still be a starter, and I think even Antoine Griezmann, who some have said hasn't had a good start, I think he's been really, really good, considering he's first off adapting to a completely different role and system than the one he had at Atleti, considering that Atletico were a very defensively oriented team. So he has to adapt to Barca's system. And even though some argue that we don't really have that much of a system, it's still a change that he has to adapt to, and new teammates, not being the only protagonist in the team, given that this team has Messi in it. So a lot of factors to take into consideration there, but you can definitely see his work rate is through the roof. He's doing everything he can to help his teammates out as much as he can, help the club out as much as he can. And I have no doubt that he'll be a great success for us, even though some said that, he's not a pure 9, he's not a striker. Why did we buy him? It seemed like Bartomeu and company were just going for a superstar signing. I don't think that was exactly the case, because I definitely think Griezmann can be very good for us, whether it's in a 9 role or out wide, where, as we know, that's not really his favorite position. He prefers to play as a second striker, as a playmaker type striker, and while that is his preferred position, I think he's intelligent enough to actually adapt to whatever position and role is given to him by Valverde. And I can't wait to see that in action, because you can see that he's slowly adapting. You can see he's slowly making the right moves, getting used to his teammates, making some really good combination play with some of his teammates. So I think he'll be vital in the Clásico, and I think he'll be vital for us this season, if provided that he stays fit, which he usually does. I think we can have a very lethal attack with him, Messi, Suarez, and Ansu Fati, and Dembele all at our disposal. So, Liga-wise, I think we can definitely win the title. Champions League is a bit tougher, because obviously we've seen the decisions of Valverde have not been the best in the two previous Champions League campaigns. So hopefully that'll change. But obviously, given the history, you do wonder whether that will actually be the case. I could see it changing a bit, given that at least, and this is a big positive, is that he's at least gone away from playing Rakitic when there are clearly other midfielders in the team who just simply offer more in his position. So I guess that's a positive, that maybe things are about to change at least a little bit. However, I will say this though, one thing I don't agree with is his lack of usage of players like Carlés Aleñá and Riqui Puig, because the difference is Aleñá is with the first team. So if he doesn't play with the first team, he doesn't play with anyone. Whereas Riqui Puig is with Barça B and gets taken up to the first team occasionally, which means that even when he's not playing with the first team, he gets playing time with the B team. Aleñá got promoted, and since then he hasn't really played much. He got a decent amount of playing time, decent-ish, last season, but he hasn't really gotten the chance that a lot of people feel that he deserves. The chance that people feel he deserves, which I'm one of those people. He hasn't really gotten that. He hasn't really gotten that chance to shine. And especially if you want to rest players like De Jong and Artur, who right now seem to be Valverde's first choice for the midfield with Busquets. You'd think that he would use players like Aleñá and Riqui Puig, but he's not. He's resorting to using players like Rakitic or Arturo Vidal occasionally. So that is something where I would not be surprised. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if Aleñá decided to leave in January on loan, because right now he's at a stage of his career where he definitely needs playing time to grow, and he's not getting that here, not as it stands right now. And then maybe if he gets a half-a-year loan to go elsewhere and then comes back in the summer when we might have a new manager, maybe then things will change. But I don't see him staying with Barca this season if he can get a loan deal elsewhere. So that's my take on the Aleñá deal, on the Aleñá situation. As for Rakitic and Arturo Vidal, I've seen a lot of people talk about it. I've seen a lot of people talk about Rakitic especially. Not too many talk about Vidal because Vidal, there was a lot of talk about Vidal last season. But this season he hasn't really played much, and as a result hasn't really been talked much about. But Rakitic's fall, shall we say, has been very noticeable. And one of Cadena Ser's higher up people, Manu Carreño, talked about how poor the treatment of Rakitic is, how poorly treated he's being in Barcelona, and that, you know, you can't really treat players this poorly. He's being treated so poor. The treatment of him is so bad that you can't really treat a player any worse than that, is essentially what he said. And Rakitic's wife came out to agree and defend Rakitic, saying that, you know, he's a professional and he's a wise guy and stuff like that. And so his perseverance is one of the reasons why he's as good as a footballer as he is. So one of the things that people have been talking about is how Valverde has went from playing Rakitic in every single game last season to not playing him virtually at all. He's had very few minutes this season, and the minutes he has gotten, he hasn't really done too much, although you could see in the last game that he played, I believe he came in against Sevilla, you could see that he was trying to make more risky passes, trying to do a bit more, trying to offer a bit more. And while I don't see him staying for next season, I think the fact that he knows that De Jong is breathing down his neck, Artur has pretty much a secured spot in that midfield. I think that will push Rakitic to try and be the Rakitic that we all saw and loved when he came from Sevilla. So hopefully that'll push Rakitic a bit and you know, give us the Rakitic that we saw back then, the Rakitic that was one of the best midfielders in the world at the time. So I don't think he can get back to that level, but I definitely think he can be valuable for us if he tries to do more than just do basic passing, because the thing that was argued a lot in his favor last season was that he adds balance, but he didn't really add too much balance last season. It has to be said, he didn't really add too much to the side last season. You could argue that he helped control the tempo, but even then, Artur does that in better fashion, not just because he does the dribbles, but because he's as press resistant as he is. It simply offers more. If you want a workhorse midfielder, Valverde also has Vidal, who we saw scored last time he played. So plenty of players, plenty of options, and I don't see Rakitic staying for next season. And if Vidal's situation stays like it is now, where he's barely getting playing time, I could sadly see him leaving as well. And it's a shame because I really, really like Vidal. I think he could be a really good super sub for us, but I also see why he would feel inclined to leave if he got a good offer. And I think if he does get a good offer, I don't think Barca would hesitate to part ways with him, both for the better of Barca and for the better of him as a player. So that's pretty much what I have to say about the veteran players, the veteran-ish. Another player that has taken a lot of headlines recently, basically taken the Spanish and Catalan media by storm, is Ansu Fati. And Ansu Fati has been, for me, he has been really, really, really good whenever he's played. He's been absolutely brilliant. And for a player who's only 16, it's really impressive how much he can do with the ball. It's impressive how much confidence he has on the ball, how you feel that he's calm on the ball. He doesn't feel... And it's weird for me to say this, right? But it almost feels like he feels less pressure than Coutinho did with Barca, towards the end at least of Coutinho's career, which was understandable, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts. I'm not going to delve too much into it here. If you would like to hear my take on the entire Coutinho situation, you can go back. I believe it was in episode 3 where I talked a lot about him and what I felt went wrong, and Dembele's situation as well. I'm pretty sure I addressed both of those things in depth in episode 3. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to do so. It's on all streaming platforms and on YouTube, as is this episode and all future episodes. It just feels like Fati has that confidence, and you know, you obviously need that confidence playing for a club like Barca, but considering he's only 16, a lot of players, many of the big names at least in Barca, have said that, had come out and said that, you know, his quality impressed us. He's only 16 years old. He's coming in here and he's bossing things. He's being unpredictable with the ball. He's almost tearing defenses apart. He's doing so well. He's doing so well, and that's also a reason why he's been pretty much a talking point for the Spain national team. To think that he's a player who's only 16 years old, came and played with the first team, and was initially going to be called up for, I believe, the U17 national team for Spain. That is, he was going to be called up for the U17 team, but then he impressed so much that, that plus the fact that the U17 matches would mean that I believe he would miss the Clásico, because there was the U17 World Cup, which was going to be played in Brazil. So that's he had to travel to Brazil as well, which means less rest than if the competition was played in Europe, because you also have to take the trip over there and the trip back into advantage, stuff like that. And the fact that it was played during a period of time where Barca had important games and could definitely use a player like Ansu Fati meant that it was very likely that he would not participate for the U17 national team for the time being. After that, the U21 team came knocking on the door, as did the first team for Spain. So you can definitely see why, with the quality he possesses and the swagger that he has on the ball, and the fact that he just seems like a very humble guy. Like, if you look at him as a footballer, he seems really good, and if you look at him as a person, he seems like a very humble guy, which is obviously great, because you don't really want a player with a big ego when he's only 16. So that's one thing, and I think the fact that he's as wanted by Spain as he is will also kind of push Valverde towards including him whenever he can. Now, obviously, he is coming back from an injury, so we have the Eibar game, and if he has recovered well enough, I could see him playing this weekend. I would not be surprised, and I hope he will play, because it is a weaker opposition, and while there is the international break to come, the Clásico is not right around the corner. There is a bit of time to go. I do hope that Valverde will make use of some of the less used players, so players like Aleñá and Ansu Fati. I hope they get a chance. I'm not saying Valverde should go in and just expect to dominate and then play with all the reserve players. I'm saying that's not what I'm saying, because we've seen how badly it's gone for us whenever we underestimate our opponents. It's always seemed to go bad for us, which, you know, is pretty logical when you think about it from one point of view, but from another perspective, when you look realistically, Barca should not struggle against Eibar. So I do hope Valverde won't play the A team. I hope he'll play some of the younger players and give them a shot, and hopefully Ansu Fati can keep developing. But again, we have to make sure that it's not done in a way, the club has to make sure that it's not done in a way that hurts him, that it's not done in a way that actually, where things go too fast, and then there's a lot of backlash and a lot of repercussions because he got too much pressure on him. So that's a very important thing to take into consideration, but I do think that he will get a good amount of chances this season, and as some would say, yes, even under Valverde. I don't think Valverde is as bad a manager as people make him out to be. I think he's a pretty good manager, but for a team like Barca, with the aspirations Barca have, given his history in the Champions League for Barcelona, I do think that change would be very beneficial for us this summer. So we'll see what happens about that. I could see him leaving this summer, but obviously the club would not let him go if there is no replacement that would be good enough to take over. Because unless we fail hysterically in the Champions League and completely lose out on La Liga and only win the Copa, or even get trashed in the Copa, unless that happens, unless we all of a sudden just take a giant hit and just underperform massively, I don't see him leaving on bad terms. But I could see him leaving this summer, and if he does, hopefully we'll get a replacement that is one that could be good for us long term. So not just a short term stopgap replacement, but actually a replacement that could be very good for us. Some people have mentioned Arsene Wenger, who I think could be. I think that could be really interesting to see. Quique Setien, while he only, he impressed a lot with Betis, and I'm not just saying that because of how they played against Barca. He genuinely did have a side that, while they didn't achieve much, materialistically, so in terms of trophies and stuff, they played wonderful football. And given the players he had, if you compare that squad he had to Barcelona's squad, just imagine how well he would play with Barcelona's squad. And given the winning mentality that is in many players in this team, I could see Quique Setien being one who would succeed. And a thing that gives me hope about that is also the fact that he was a candidate for the Espanyol job that David Gallego left the post of. I have not looked into it, but I do think that he left. It's a technical decision, so I think it's a common agreement that he left the club. But then Setien was one of the candidates to take over, but Pablo Machín came in and took that spot. So Quique Setien is still available, and I do hope that he's one that could take over this summer. I've seen from some outlets that the River Plate manager, the Argentine side River Plate, that their manager is a candidate, and I do hope that he's not one in the pole position, because I think at this point we need to, first off, we need to stray away from the idea that the manager has to have played for Barca, because the fact that he has played for Barca does not mean that he is necessarily the perfect fit. But also, other than that, I think it's also if you're going to move on from Enrique and Valverde, you need a manager who is proven, whether it's in a certain, whether he's proven with a lot of trophies, whether like a really decorated manager, or if he's a manager that has proven to play very, very good football with a squad that isn't as good as Barcelona's maybe, or even as good as Barcelona's. We need that kind of manager, and I think Quique Setien could be a good one. I think Arsene Wenger could be a really good one. So hopefully Barca will make the right decision if Valverde does part ways with the club. And obviously we'll have to see about that. Nothing is certain yet, but I could see him leaving this summer. After the debacle that happened this summer, I could see him leaving the next summer. So that sentence really was a tongue twister. So on that note, it's question time. It is 3 a.m. Let's go. All right. Okay. So yeah, let's get right into it. The first question, before I address the first question, again, I'd like to remind you guys that first off, I'm not getting a whole lot of questions, so I'm slowly running out of questions. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, whether it is brand related or Barcelona related or just in general football related, let's say you follow, let's say you're a fan of a team like Arsenal or a team in the Bundesliga or something, and you'd like me to give a take on a certain player or a certain team, or even another team in the Champions League, if you have any questions, feel free to send them using the hashtag. It'll be on screen now. If you're streaming this, the hashtag is TDSPod, The Driven Shot Podcast, so TDSPod. Feel free to send any questions in using Twitter, if you are on Twitter, or you can send me an email if that works better for you. Today I'd just like to tell you we have 2 questions, so not a whole lot of questions, and that's why I've tried to make the first segment a bit longer and a bit more topics taken in there. And on that note, let's get right into the first question from a very loyal fan of the brand, of the Blaugranagram news outlet, and also of the Driven Shot podcast. Faris Hayasat, again, I appreciate you and I appreciate your support. So the question says, who do you realistically see us going for in January? Now, today, which is, right now it's 3 a.m., so it's Wednesday. But last night, so Tuesday, Messi had talked to RAC 1, and he had told them that he was scared that Real Madrid would come in and swoop Neymar, because Neymar had talked so much about wanting to leave Paris, being so desperate to leave the club, and knowing that Barcelona might not get him, he was scared that Real Madrid would come in and persuade him with something and then and get him to Madrid. So I could see Barca making an effort in January, because some Barca officials have come out and said that the situation is pretty much the same, but there are still talks. The player still wants to come to Barcelona. That hasn't really changed. So given that there still are talks, and given that Rakitic, the fact that his wife is coming out and talking about it, and the fact that it's so much in the media that he's not playing and it's a fall from grace, etc., I could see him being used as a part of a Neymar offer. So I could see us going for Neymar in January. I don't really see what else we could go for in January, depending on if Umtiti has recovered from his injury and recovered well. If he hasn't, I could see us going for an additional center back. But I don't see many positions where reinforcements would be needed, to be honest. Maybe a proper winger, either as a backup for Messi or, well, considering we have Ansu Fati, and Ansu Fati has proven to be very good on the left side, Messi is on paper a right wing. So I think a right wing backup would not be too bad of an idea, given that we sold Malcolm and didn't really. You could argue Ansu Fati was his replacement, but Ansu Fati is more of a left winger naturally. So, well, at least he's played better there. So I could see us going for maybe a backup winger and or Neymar. And if we don't get Neymar in January and he stays in Paris, I could see us going all in for him in the summer. Now, that was the first question. The second question comes from, let me see, Safi Shabazi. I'm sorry if I completely butchered your name there. That was not my intention. But he says, other than Leo, Messi, obviously, which player from the current Barca squad do you like the most and why? That's a tough question to answer. I will say I really like Antoine Griezmann. I really, really do. I've followed him since his Real Sociedad days back when he was beasting it with Carlos Vela. So he's a player that I really like, and I admired a lot when he was in Atletico, and now that he came to Barca, I was over the moon, man. I cannot tell you how happy that made me, especially because of all the threads that I've been doing for transfer related stuff and other threads that I'm doing. So that thread meant a lot to me that I actually could complete it like that. Frenkie de Jong is also a player that I absolutely love, simply because he's such a humble guy. You know, Frenkie de Jong is a quality player, but he's also very humble. He doesn't go, like, you can see some players going into a club and saying, hey, I'm going in, I'm just going to start, right? You see some players, let me give you an example. Benjamin Pavard, when he joined from Stuttgart, I believe, to Bayern Munich, he said that he genuinely considers himself, I think it was either one of or the best full left back in the league. Right back. Probably right back. He said something along those lines. It's been a while, but I think he essentially said that he was one of the best defenders in the league, or that he was the best, I think, fullback or something like that. And that's one of the things where you're like, okay, this guy's got a pretty big ego, and you don't really want that. I could see some players having it, and some players have a reason to have it. If you asked me 2-3 years ago, Cristiano Ronaldo, does he have the right to be as outspoken and borderline arrogant as some people say he is? Back then, you could argue, yeah, he definitely has a case. But then you have players where they've had maybe one good season and then they switch clubs and they go all out and say that, hey, I expect, I'm going in, I'm going to just go, I'm a beast this league or whatever. That's one of the things that I really like about De Jong, is that he's so humble, and he even was that at Ajax as well. So it's not like he's pretending to be humble. He's always been that type of person. So that's one of the reasons I like him a lot. Also, one of the same reasons I like Artur a lot, other than the reason that he reminds me a lot of Xavi. Like, if you slap the number 6 on the back of his shirt, and you watched Insane, this is a very, very, very stressed out example. If you watched it in like a 144p quality, you would not be able to tell the difference. I just realized if you watch it in 144 quality, probably not going to be able to see anything. But my point is, he reminds me so much of Xavi, and of course we have to be careful and not put too much pressure on it, but he's just been so good. And even though he's been so good, he's been fairly underrated amongst his fan base. So I really like him. He's a very humble guy. If you watch the official Barca videos where they meet him personally and stuff like that, you can see how he's such a pure guy. And I think those three would be the ones that really stand out to me. And yeah, that's the answer for the second question. Also, I do apologize if this podcast seems a bit, awkward-ish. I don't know how to really explain it. It is currently 3 in the morning. I spent over an hour, I think, setting this up. And when I set it up and everything was good to go, I started recording, and then the phone that I use to record with currently ended up not working properly because of the battery was being too low. The battery was too low, essentially. So I had to charge it. Then I went to charge it, and I'm charging it as I'm recording, and it stops recording because it says there was too high temperature inside the phone. So it had to stop recording. So I had to re-record it part. And right now it's 3 a.m., and I'm pretty damn tired. So that's why I might seem a bit, hopefully that does not affect this too much. And I hope that you guys nonetheless have enjoyed the podcast so far. This episode, I hope you enjoyed this episode so far, and the podcast in general. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to drop a like and leave a comment below before we move on to the next and final segment. And also, if you're streaming this on Spotify or SoundCloud or Apple or Google Podcasts, feel free to drop a rating on the podcast. It really, really, really helps. It helps it reaching out to more people, and in general helps give the podcast more exposure and hopefully get me more feedback if you guys have anything you like a lot or dislike a lot about this podcast. So if you have anything, feel free to let me know. And on that note, it is time for Laugh of the Week. All right, this time it's a bit different. Previously I've stumbled over some football videos. Last time it was a video from during a football match. So this time it's a bit different. This time, where I usually sometimes might give you some football related videos, this time it is football related, but it's not from a football pitch, so to speak. This time it's from AS Roma's official account, and this guy replied to them saying, telling them to follow back or Roma gets relegated next season, and if you block me, that's 10 years of bad luck. But follow me and Roma joins Serie A, and Roma wins the Serie A and the Coppa Italia next season. So you might have seen this short clip. I think it's 3 or 4 seconds. If you know the character Big Shaq, who made the Tingo Skra back, I think it was last year, probably 2 years ago now. So it's a clip. I love this clip so much, man.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
It's essentially this.
You have the facilities for that, big man.
I love this video because you can literally use it on so many occasions, and I've seen some usages of it that have been very funny, and I've seen some usages of it that have just been like dark humor, like too dark, and I love it. I love it. Kudos to Roma for that, and they actually ended up following the guy, so that's pretty cool. Again, I think we've pretty much reached the end of this episode. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send them using the TDSPod hashtag. If you've made it this far, you know the wave emoji? The wave emoji. Comment that down below if you're watching it on YouTube. And drop a like if you enjoyed it so far. This episode had... I don't know if this episode... I wouldn't say... This episode has definitely been an interesting one because I've tried to do it a bit differently than I usually do, and I'm experimenting with this. So some episodes may be a bit different because I'm trying to find the perfect formula. We are 5 episodes in, and I think so far I've tried some different styles, some different approaches and deliveries and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this so far, and if you are, do let me know. If there's anything you feel like I should change about this, do let me know. I know that some of you complained. I think it was around episode 3, I think, where some of you guys told me that I should, it would be pretty cool if I showed more energy when I was recording these. And I think the reason that I didn't show that too much was because prior to this, all the podcasts that I had done before I launched the Driven Shot podcast were audio podcasts. And when you're doing audio podcasts, you don't really pay much attention to your facial expressions and the energy you put, like your movements. You don't really pay too much attention to that because your energy is purely going through your voice. The viewers and the listeners cannot see you. So I had to adjust from that to actually, you know, doing this, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's just a case of really just getting used to how I do these. And again, I'm still experimenting with it, and I'm personally really happy with how they've gone so far. Obviously, the views could be better, but I'm still working on finding the perfect time to post these, because I've noticed that some episodes I've posted them at wrong times per se, and then I post an episode, let's say a week or two later, at a different time, and that gets more views. So I'm trying to find the exact time and to post these. And I think I'm close to finding it. So if there is anything you guys feel should change about how I post these or how I promote these, do let me know. And I will have a big announcement coming soon regarding the brand, so stay tuned for that. The merch is also dropping soon. So I've shown it to some people, and they've really liked it. So I'm really excited to show it and share it with you guys, and hopefully you guys will like it as much as I do. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. And I have been Omar, your host. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. I'd like to redo that. Should I? Yeah, let's redo it. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed, do drop a like. Give it a rating if you're watching it on an app that allows you to give ratings. And I'll see you soon. I'll see you on Twitter, on Instagram. Do follow me if you haven't already. All the links to my social media are down below. And I will have a big announcement coming soon, so stay tuned for that. The merch will be dropping soon as well. And I've shown it to some people, and they've really liked it. So I hope you guys will as well. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time, and peace out.